What's your favorite scary movie? Hey, man.
We'll tear your soul apart.
Well, I'm Pennywise the dancing now.
We're gonna get you.
Oh, Lord on the beat!
God, don't do that.
But sometimes death is better.
Hey everybody, what's up? KillJoy Jake here, and instead of having friends, I have horror movies. Today we're going to be ranking all 5 of Radio Silence's movies that they've directed, at least. We're going to be also talking about some of the other films that they've produced, but first I'm going to need y'all to like this video, subscribe, do all of that because it helps this channel grow. I won't cry myself to sleep if you do that, so make sure to check that out. And also, if you can support me on Patreon for just $1 a month, you can get a full-on video of me just like talking about all these horror movies in the back. And then I also have another video coming out next week where I talk about all the props on my set as well. So for $1 a month, you can check out both of those videos. That would be pretty sick. So go check out my Patreon. The link for that will be in the description below. Alrighty, so getting into this, ranking these movies, obviously I want to talk a little bit about some of the films that Radio Silence has produced, which is the film's Phobias, which is it's a pretty good anthology horror film. It's not like my favorite, but I recommend it. It's pretty interesting, got some cool stuff going on there. And another film that I actually really like is VHS 94, my favorite horror film of 2021. This one is definitely one of the better anthology horror films ever. It's one of my personal favorites, and I highly recommend it for anyone who didn't see it this past October. Go check that out on Shudder if you haven't already. Coming in 5th place is Devil's Due. Now, although this is last, I still think there's a lot to be loved here. There's a lot of really interesting things about this movie that I want to talk about. For example, its found footage style is kind of done stylistically opposed to necessity, if that makes sense. Most found footage films, like a lot of the horror is derived from the fact that they're found footage and that it's like these people that are going through this horrible situation and they have to die at the end. That's what found footage would imply. But this movie's kind of different. The only reason it really does the whole found footage thing is for style purposes. And there's even like points in the movie where like these bandits are filming them, there's the question of who compiled all this footage together at the end of the movie, and Radio Silence has even said in interviews all the way back in 2014, they don't really give a fuck. That's not what the point of this movie is. That's just something done stylistically, and it's a big criticism of the film. Personally, it doesn't bug me that much. I actually wrote it down as a positive. I think it's kind of cool that they've told this story in a found footage-like style. Now, a negative for this movie is that I feel like the story is a bit generic. There's some jump scares that are like, okay, I've seen this before in a horror film before, I've seen it before. It's a bit generic. The plot line is basically just Rosemary's Baby, but a little different, and I don't know, it's kind of just like a found footage take on Rosemary's Baby. I like it, and I think it's interesting to take that same idea and do it in a different way stylistically, especially with like the found footage style that I already covered. It's cool, but it's a bit generic at times. The jump scares and the body horror of this film, though, are probably my biggest positive of the movie, because the body horror is like the thing that creeps me out the most. There's like probably the most iconic shot from the entire movie is the main girl who's pregnant during most of the runtime of this film. You see her like big stomach and she's kind of like falling asleep, and you see like like the baby's like claw or whatever poke out of the stomach a little bit. You see like a handprint or whatever, and it's really gross and it's really creepy. There's also a bunch of good scenes in this, a lot of really good scares. But the one in particular that I really like is kind of like an unnecessary scene, which is I feel is a bit problematic. There's these kids and they're like walking through the woods. They discover the female character, I can't remember her name for the life of me, and she's eating a deer in the middle of the woods, just like raw meats, which is something which is a theme throughout the entire movie, which is really just a creepy thing to see somebody doing. It's scary, and it's just like, what's wrong? Like, something is clearly wrong if you're doing that, and it's messed up. It's really unnerving, and we see her just like use her mind powers basically to throw these people around and kill these little teenagers, it's really messed up. I love this movie a lot. I think it's not my favorite Radio Silence film, but it's good. I think it's still a decent horror flick that I think should be checked out, and I would recommend it for sure. Anyone who likes found footage movies, I think they would really like Devil's Due. Southbound is coming in 4th place. I loved it. Another movie that I kind of wish I could have ranked it higher, but I just feel like it has some problems as well. First of all, the strongest thing about Southbound is its wraparound and overall concept. The whole thing that it keeps like not cutting back to, but like the whole idea of this kind of anthology horror where it's like the skits don't really have a wraparound that they keep cutting back to. It's like the end of one skit will lead in and tie in to the beginning of the next one, and it will actually set up the whole next skit, which is really cool. Most of the time it does that, but then when it doesn't, some of the stories are a bit generic. Once again, I feel like they're really some of the skits are really lacking at times. Is a big problem with me for this one. There's 2 really solid skits, but then there's like 3 that are about like just okay, in my opinion. The whole concept though about this with Matt and Chad right from Radio Silence being in the opening and closing skit, and how this whole movie is kind of like one big circle, that it's a loop that you can just keep watching over and over again. It's scary. It's messed up. It also implies the idea that maybe the loops aren't the same every single time. So it's food for thought. I love movies like this. It's very open-ended and leaves you with more questions than it answered. So I love films like this. Radio Silence does that really well, especially in Southbound. I think maybe the best, honestly, out of all their films. That's the one that is the most mysterious and the most, like, maybe original concept, I would say. And that's why I think I like this. So I think that's why Southbound gets a lot of points from me. I put it at 4th place though, because overall some of the skits are like real low spots for me. There's maybe the 3rd or 4th skit, I can't remember precisely, is like about like these weird creatures or whatever, and it seems like it's a cool concept, but it kind of ends up just falling flat for me. And there's one about a guy who goes to like a hospital trying to save a girl he hit in the road, and that one also is a bit meh. Like it's not great. It's pretty tense at times, but it's nothing that like keeps me on the edge of my seat. Like I have to know what happens. It goes on for a bit too long, and I don't know. Some of the skits, like I said, are lacking at times. But moving on to number 3, I put VHS at the 3rd spot, which I don't know how I feel about that. Radio Silence only did one of the skits for VHS, but I also love this movie a lot. VHS is a really fun anthology horror film. If you couldn't tell, Radio Silence probably really likes anthology horror a lot. They've been attached to many projects with that same concept. VHS is one of the better ones out there, though, for sure. It's a really scary idea, and it's got a roller coaster plot line, specifically talking about there's just their skit from VHS, if I'm just critiquing that. Like I said, the big minus here, which is why I think VHS and Southbound are easily you could swap them, is because it's just one skit. The Radio Silence guys really only did one skit, where I'm sure they had some kind of creative control over all the skits in Southbound. So I really do like their skit, and the ending is a bit of a train wreck, if you know what I'm saying. Ha, that's funny. Only if you've seen it, that's funny. But yeah, no, I really enjoy VHS. I really enjoy their skit from it. It's my favorite one, the Radio Silence one, and I think that's why I put it above Southbound, is because like they easily had the best skit of all of the skits in the first VHS. Although it's arguable that Siren is better. I really like Siren too. Both of those are like maybe tied for first of my favorite from the original VHS for skits. But yeah, that's a big deal. Without VHS, you don't have the rest of the movies on this list either, because this is kind of what shot them into stardom. So that's another reason for it coming in 3rd place. But coming in 2nd place, and man, I mean, these next 2 movies, in my opinion, are right here. They are neck and neck, and I'm putting the number 1 spot where it is for a certain reason, but coming in 2nd place is Ready or Not. For so many reasons that are similar to the number 1 spot. To start this list off, Ready or Not, the social commentary on class is geniusly told through this movie. There's no point where it feels too preachy, where it feels like they didn't touch on it enough. It's not ham-handed. It's just the perfect amount of social commentary to not be too in your face. They even changed a line of dialogue at the end of the movie that I felt like would have been going into it a little too much. And the ending line of the film was supposed to be Samara Weaving. She's smoking a cigarette on the steps covered in blood. And when she goes there, originally the line was supposed to be when a cop would come up to her and be like, "What happened here?" or something. She would say "rich people," which I feel like is a little too on the nose. And they talk about this in the commentary for the film, is they say that would have been too on the nose. The whole point of this movie is that it's kind of like a subtle social commentary that's told not directly in your face, but subconsciously. And I feel like that's the best way to do social commentary in horror films. So she specifically says like in-laws or relatives or something. That's the line from the movie. It's slipping me now, but the point is is that it's not all about that. It's more about the actual storyline that takes place here, her having to kill her entire family that she just married into. It's a scary idea, and it focuses not just on the social commentary, but also the story at hand, which I feel most movies that deal with some kind of social commentary where they're elevated horror, they sometimes don't always touch on that as well as they could. Maybe they overdo it, is how I feel sometimes, especially with most modern horror movies. The good ones don't, though. The good ones do it just the right amount, I think. Also, another plus from this film is the cast. Samara Weaving just steals the show, is one of my favorite modern final girls. She's amazing. I would love to see her in a Scream 6, by the way. It's super fast-paced and has some super witty dialogue too, which is another thing that I just love about both the latest two films from Radio Silence, is that they're super fast-paced. They don't, like, once they get going, they don't stop all the way to the end, and it's just like this roller coaster that just is going 100 miles an hour all the way to the finish. And with the dialogue too, something that I love about writer Guy Busick, who did both the screenplays for Ready or Not and Scream, is just the way he writes dialogue. It feels so natural. It feels like actual conversation you would be hearing between like someone in their 20s with another person in their 20s. Like, I just love the way he writes dialogue. It's genius. It works well with modern characters. And another thing is that there's a lot of disturbing scenes in this that just drive that horror train really well. The nail scene in this is one of the best, like, Hitchcockian scenes where you see something and you're like, you know what's gonna happen, but the main character doesn't. It's that whole like thing that Hitchcock likes to set up in his movies. He kind of came up with that whole idea in film, and it's done really well here. Samara Weaving is climbing up a ladder at one point, and you see this nail sticking out, and she just smacks her hand right through it, and it's like, oh my god. Oh, there's a few scenes like that in Scream as well. These guys are amazing, and they've matured so much from where they started. Like, from VHS and the Southbound days, they have just gotten so much better at filmmaking. Like, it's amazing. You go back and watch all these movies, and you're like, wow, I can't believe that's where they started, and this is where they are now. You always saw the potential in them, but the way they've matured as filmmakers is just genius, and you see it with each of their films, I think, with how they've improved over time, and it's amazing. Coming in first place is, of course, the new Scream film. I loved it. Not only is it one of my favorite entries from one of my favorite horror franchises, it's done by Radio Silence, who I hold to such a high standard. All 5 of their movies, I think, have some kind of amazing merit or have done something that is just really interesting to me and very different from what else is going on in the horror scene right now, and I love that they brought that to Scream. That is the perfect franchise for these guys, and I love everything about this film. I feel pretty much the same way about this as I do with Ready or Not. The performances were great. If you want to see me talk more in depth about this, I of course have a massive spoiler review of it, but the performances were great. The social commentary on toxic fandom is amazing and well executed, so much so that I feel like it's actually bringing a lot of toxic fans out of the woodworks and showing people's true colors. It's very fast-paced, just like Ready or Not, with also having that same amount of witty dialogue that I love from Guy Busick, and super disturbing kills. The one that got me the most, which I'm going to spoil something from Scream 5, so if you haven't seen it yet, there you go. I'm giving you a little warning. One of my favorite deaths in the entire movie is Wes. When he gets stabbed, it's such a simple kill. It really is when you think about it. He's just getting stabbed through the neck, but the way they do it, the way they frame it and how slow it is, it's so much more personal, and that's what's so fucked up about it. I think that when I went into this film, I was expecting like more creative kills from the Radio Silence guys. I thought they were going to give us maybe more like explosive kills and crazier shit, but instead what they did is they toned it down and they just made a knife kill even more disturbing than it ever has been before in the Scream franchise, which I greatly appreciated. That was something I was not expecting at all, and I was thoroughly surprised with just about every kill. There's one that if you watch my spoiler review, I talk about that I don't love because I feel like it was maybe edited for time, but the Wes's kill especially was one that stuck with me, and how both of the killers die in that movie. Come on, that's not a spoiler to say there's 2 killers in a Scream film. Come on. Every Scream movie has had 2 killers. And before you mention Scream 3, Angelina was the second killer in that movie. I am committed to that theory. I'm married to it. I don't think I'm ever going to not believe that theory, because man, go back and watch Scream 3. Like, Wes Craven was, as my buddy Steven would say, rebel filmmaking, and decided to write that in without writing it in, technically. That's a whole nother video, though, of course. But what did you guys think of this entire list of my Radio Silence movies ranked? How would you rank them? Leave that in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching my latest ranking video. I have not done one of these in a while. If you want to see more of them, leave me a comment about, hey, Jake, do more ranking videos, because we like these. Oh, okay, sure. I'd be so down. I love ranking movies. I also like hearing what how other people like to rank them, too. That's always fun to respond to. So please leave those in the comments below. Like this video, subscribe, support me on Patreon if you can. The link for that will be in the description below. And as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.